All right, well, today on this video, we're going to talk about a report that I just read. It's the 2024 Crisis Report, and this is going to be a discussion on that. This is the 11th Crisis Management Report, and the link is there on the screen. So I'm going to go through this, just some of the highlights that I picked up on when I read it, and then kind of relate it to things that I've seen and personal experiences, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So about the report, just very, very quickly, it covers about a dozen plus countries, around 150 respondents, I think, replied to this one. And there you have it on the screen, the top kind of industries that responded. So 30% financial, then some tech, insurance, consulting, and so on. So that's who responded to it. The big thing they noticed was gaps in pre-planning. Well, this should be no surprise to anyone who's actually in the profession. They said that 71% of organizations indicated they were extremely prepared or prepared. But when you actually looked at the data, that wasn't the case. And I've seen that many, many times. People seem to think they're more mature than they are. They're more prepared. They're more ready, both as a company and individuals. A lot of individuals might say, "Oh yeah, I'm quite prepared," but when you actually crunch the numbers, you're not. Organizations were least prepared for supply chain disruptions, financial market disruptions, or disgruntled employees. And you would think that after all the supply chain issues that we were on about during COVID, and all of the recent financial market disruption items that are in the news, we'd be a little bit more prepared. And another interesting stat from the report was that only 30% of all organizations document areas of executive risk acceptance and perform annual reviews. And I myself have found that that's one big thing I've seen is that even if an area, a director, a VP, whomever says, "Oh yeah, we're just we're not going to put these controls in place. We're going to accept that risk." That's fine. That's a choice you can make. If you're making an informed, risk-based decision to accept the risk, that is one of your options, to just accept it. If you don't want to treat it or terminate it or transfer it, you can just tolerate or accept it. But you should be documenting it. You have to have a documentation saying, "We accepted it at this time based on this rationale or these decisions." And very few, and I've seen this many, many times in different industries, very few actually document that acceptance. Another very interesting stat was that using a cell phone or a mobile phone was the top method that everyone said they were going to communicate during an event, during a crisis. But only, so 91% they were going to use it, but only 71% said that their plans were accessible in mobile format. Very, very interesting. So if you're going to have plans, make sure they can actually access them in the way you're going to communicate. Top challenges noted for corporate level crisis management teams are their clarity on when the crisis management team is notified and activated. They needed that. That was a challenge. They did not have clarity. They were not focusing on a high level strategic stuff. They were getting down into the weeds of what the tactical teams and the operational teams would be doing. And the transparency in crisis communications. And that's, from what I've seen, both internal and external. How much do you tell your own staff, your own team members, and how much do you tell the public? And there's a great reluctance from people to really communicate. They don't seem to realize that they'll be doing themselves a greater disservice by withholding too much information. Top crises. Technology disasters in the report were indicated to have a greater impact than natural disasters. And software and cyber issues were topping that list. Kind of makes sense because when you look at natural disasters, they're more localized. But with technology disasters, especially the software and cyber issues, but with the concentration risk of just a few big vendors or a few big providers, if they have an issue or go down, the impact will be far more widespread. I've worked with companies, and I'll say, well, what happens? They say we're a Google shop, for example, or we're a Microsoft shop. Well, what happens if that goes down? There's a couple of big providers, big applications that are used, the CrowdStrike issues, the different things that happen with those things, far greater impact. Estimating financial losses post-crisis. 57% said they had difficulty estimating financial losses. Well, that's no surprise from what I've seen. Most companies do a very poor job of recording and tracking expenses and losses during a crisis or related to a crisis. I've seen some, I'll try and capture this to try and dig in and find out what the losses actually were. And they'll say, well, we didn't have any losses. I say, okay, well, what did you do? Well, we waived fees for clients. We did loan forgiveness. We did this, we did that. And I said, well, aren't those losses? Oh, no, that's not a loss. We just didn't collect all that money that we were supposed to collect. What? That's a loss. You have lost that income, that revenue. Many don't use the incident command system or any form of incident management system. They don't have it structured. Because if you did, you would know that there's a functional spot within that structure, and things that happen at every single event, there's a financial component. But if you don't structure and plan for it, or you don't do it effectively, then it's often overlooked. Many don't have pre-established accounting codes to use during a crisis. One company I worked with, as we evolved and matured, and had the financial people, the accountants, and everyone come in on responses, they saw the value in setting up codes ahead of time. And they'd say, okay, here's 10 codes we've pre-established. Hopefully we don't have to use any of them. But if we do, and at the start of the incident, they would just tell everyone, use this coding for all of your expenses. And they could tell you right away what the losses and expenses were. Contradiction around people. So there was a strong indication that, the company said, yeah, people are our greatest asset. The employees, that's it. Most just say that in word and they don't follow up in deed. Because few organizations of the report said they actually plan to increase permanent full-time staff. And I would say specifically for risk management or resilience. Now, this was across the board, just in general staff. But from what I've seen, it is very much more specific to the risk and resilience managers. As the work still needs to get done, there'll either be a heavier burden placed on existing staff, or they're going to have to use more consultants. And in my experience, again, with consultants, they bring a cookie cutter approach. The internal staff will end up doing the bulk of the work anyways, meeting with and providing information to the consultants that they already know. And the consultants quite often will staple it together, charge you a big bill, send it back. And it's not as effective as in-house expertise. What you want to do, nirvana, right, is getting to where you have that expertise in-house because they know your experiences, your history, all of that stuff better. It's very odd to me as, when things go bad, quite often the risk folks get cut. Oh, you didn't do your job properly. Why did all this stuff happen? Bad you. If things are going well and there's no big incidents, then quite often you see the risk teams getting downsized too. And they'll say, well, nothing's happening. Why do we need this? You guys are just a cost center. You're an expense. What are you doing? Well, maybe the reason nothing's happening is because they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Just have a think about that. Most concerned about versus most prepared for and least prepared for. So the respondents were most concerned about cyber attack, data breach, network outage, power outage, supply chain disruption first, and then all the natural disasters, your ice storms, your fires, your floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, all of that stuff came well after all the technology stuff. Most concerned about technology. What were they most prepared for? Winter weather, health issues, power outage, disease, fire, flood. Well, now one could argue maybe that's why they're not as concerned about it, because they're more prepared for it. So that might be a good thing. Least prepared for: software or server issues, disgruntled employees, supply chain or financial market disruption. So those were some of the pullouts from the report. Corporate level crisis management team. I'm going to focus on this a little bit more. 11% of respondents said they had none. No defined crisis management team at a corporate level. 7% said they had a team, but there was really no clear predefined leader. 24% had a team, but only a few primary roles had been identified. So have a think about this. Go back and look at where you are. Do you have a team? Do you have clearly identified roles? Not just the primary roles, but team roles, all of them. If your work streams, expectations, or owners are not clear, if you don't know who or what those are, you have an immature program. If you aren't clear or know when to activate your team and who and when to notify, consider yourself immature. If you focus on the operational stuff, how to actually deal with the cyber attack, the fire, the flood, the pandemic, the building closure, the bomb threat, if your corporate team is thinking about that and not the high level strategic stuff, you have an immature team. Lack of structured, practiced approach is the biggest challenge. You could go to any company, I think, and again, if you're honest about it, that's what the big challenge would be. You need structure and you need a practiced approach. Most beneficial during a response. This was a pick from the report. And personal team experience was the most beneficial during a response. I can see that. Experience counts for a lot. Exercises was second. Mass notification capability, a close third. Predefined teams, we just talked about that. Very beneficial. Handbooks, checklists, job aids. Strategies in advance to address single points of failure. Written plans and procedures, training. And then way at the tail end, your outside resources and your software tools and automation. So even though everyone is all, hot and bothered about we need automation, we need more software, we need more tools, we need more. Well, that's not what was showing to be the most beneficial during an actual response. Personal team member experience, training, exercises, notification, right? Your mass notification, having those predefined teams and having your handbooks and checklists. That was the most beneficial. Should take some good stuff away from that. Program maturity, and this was a self-rating. So 3% said they were reactive, 26% developing, 32% sustaining, 25% evolving, and 14% at the highest and capable. I would challenge most, and again, this is self-rating, and oversight and challenge is a big thing that's missing. Honest oversight and challenge. Let's throw that word in there. You can't be afraid to go toe to toe with, management, executive, and not combative, but you have to stand your ground and be able to say that's not honest. That is not actually what's happening. And if you look at your programs, really look at them, and then have someone challenge them, someone who knows what they're doing, challenge those, I suspect you'll land a lot lower than where you think you are if you're being honest and you have effective challenge. I've seen that time and again. People rate themselves higher. It's just like when you do any kind of 360 feedback or anything like that, you might think you're awesome. And someone else says, yeah, you're pretty good, but you're not quite awesome yet. So quite often, sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes we're doing better than we think we are, but very often we're a little biased to rating ourselves higher than we should be. Some takeaways from this. I would say, look it up, read the report, get your own information from it. There's lots more there than I've touched on. This is just a very skimming the surface of it, just to whet your appetite. But that's funny. We're talking about takeaway. I was going to put a picture of takeaway food up here. Now we're talking about appetite, and which is good because we will do a video on risk appetite soon. But be honest in your maturity assessment and your gap analysis. Be honest when you're doing your BIAs and you're putting down all your processes. List that stuff down. There should be no shame in being honest and saying we're not where we want to be and we need help to get there, or it's going to take some time to get there. Develop a team, train and practice. Yeah, experience counts for a lot, and a lot of companies and a lot of teams just say, yeah, we'll just get through it. We always have. That may be the case, but that's kind of counting on luck. That's not really doing anyone, especially your successors, in building up a team. Make sure your needed plans and documents are in the format that you can access. If you're going to talk the talk and say that people are your greatest asset, treat them accordingly. Treat them like that. I far too often see, oh, yeah, the people are our biggest and greatest asset. That's awesome. Do you pay them properly? No, not really. No, we're going to spend a whole bunch more money on technology because that's where it's at. Well, not according to a lot of this stuff that we're seeing, right? They are your greatest asset. Artificial intelligence and your applications and your technology and all that stuff won't save you if you don't have committed, educated, trained, and practiced people. And another takeaway, don't sack the risk team if nothing happens this year. Maybe celebrate instead. All right, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, share it. We'll talk